A child's grinding stone. That's what they used. Not a machete. Not a gun. A grinding stone, the kind sitting in almost every Yoruba kitchen in Lagos. The kind a grandmother uses to crush pepper in the morning. They took that stone, and they used it to grind the skulls of sleeping families in Ikorodu. From 2016 to 2019, a gang so feared that residents refused to say its name aloud stalked the communities of Ikorodu. They moved in darkness, harvesting body parts. Behind them stood wealthy men in big houses, men who needed something money alone could not buy. This is not a story about superstition. This is a story about murder, organized crime, and the silence that lets evil breathe. This is Baddo. Ikorodu is a city of over 700,000 souls, pressed against the northeastern edge of Lagos state. It is a place of fishermen and traders, of evening prayers and children chasing each other between zinc-roofed compounds. It is not a place that expects to be hunted. But in early 2016, something began moving through the communities of Owutu, Agric, and Imota. It moved at night and with a signature so precise that investigators said it could not have been random. The victims were almost always families, attacked in their beds during the hours when Ikorodu had finally surrendered to sleep. The killers gained entry not through explosives or gunfire, but through patience and darkness. In multiple crime scenes, investigators documented the use of local grinding stones ojiri as murder weapons. These objects of domesticity and survival were turned into instruments of killing. The choice was not incidental, it told the community that the killers were already inside their homes and knew their lives. Investigators noted early on that these killings were not motivated by robbery alone. Items of value were often left behind, but something else was missing: body parts. By mid-2016, the Whisper network of Ikorodu carried the name Baddo. In Yoruba slang, the term usually implies a boss, but here it was said in hushed tones over compound fences. The attacks followed a pattern that defied the logic of ordinary crime. Families were specifically selected, and entry points were calculated. It was methodical. Word spread that victims had been mutilated in ways that went beyond violence, involving the removal of internal organs. For investigators, this was the line that separated a common criminal from a ritual organization. What investigators eventually pieced together suggested a layered organization: field operatives at the bottom, young men from the communities, and above them, handlers, financiers, and a leadership structure that insulated itself from the violence. The foot soldiers were often recruited from the ranks of the unemployed, finding in the cult both income and a terrifying sense of power. Some were reportedly initiated through acts of violence, required to participate in an attack before being trusted with the full knowledge of the organization. Nigeria has a documented history of ritual killings for the purpose of harvesting body parts to be sold for blood money. In the case of Baddo, confessions revealed a supply chain. Foot soldiers carried out the attacks, and the harvested parts were moved up the chain to men who lived in better neighborhoods and drove expensive cars. The ritual element meant that somewhere between the crime scene and a large house in Lagos Island, there was a transaction and a demand for more. A detective reviewing financial records found a pattern of cash withdrawals always following a reported attack, circling the matching dates in red. By 2018, fear had metamorphosed into a physical reality for thousands of families. Compounds organized into informal watch groups where men took shifts and residents carried plastic whistles as an alarm system. When the state failed to protect them, vigilante groups formed, angry young men armed with machetes and driven by adrenaline. Suspicion became currency, and anyone unfamiliar was at risk. This hysteria led to the tragic death of a man named Oniokonam, who was killed by a mob after being wrongly accused of being a Baddo member. He was a victim of the very terror the cult had sowed. In early 2019, the Lagos State Police Command launched Operation Stop the Episode to end the crisis. Raids swept through affected communities before dawn, leading to dozens of arrests. Some suspects were found with mobile phones containing communications with higher-ranking members, while others had financial records pointing to a money trail. Among those detained were individuals who occupied the middle rungs of the network, men with businesses whose involvement shocked the communities that knew them.
While the arrests disrupted the network and led to convictions, the trauma remains structural.
Residents describe a persistent hypervigilance and an inability to feel safe in their own homes. For the families of victims, the grief is compounded by the ritual nature of the crimes, which complicates traditional burial rites. Today, life in Ikorodu has resumed and the markets are open, but the underlying conditions that created the network persist. As long as there is a demand for ritual parts, the peace remains fragile. In Ikorodu, they have learned the difference between the night being quiet and the night being safe.